Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name's Paul Hines, I'm the MD for RI APAC. For those of you who don't know me, I've been in the job a year tomorrow. It's been I guess what you would call an eventful year for all of us, but I have to say I've enjoyed every minute of it. It's been great to move to this part of the world with my family, and it's been awesome. Prior to this, I worked for RI in the UK for 5 years, running a retail practice there, and I've got over 20 years experience in the insight and customer loyalty sectors, and it's been great to add to that experience by working with our clients in the APAC region as well. I wanted to give you a huge welcome. This is our first RI live virtual event. We're going to discuss the latest insights on COVID-19 and how that's impacting consumer behaviours, shopping needs and attitudes to the new future we're all facing. Being our first event, we're excited and a little bit terrified in equal measure. We'll talk through the structure of today very shortly, but if we do get any technical hitches, bear with us. I'm sure if they do come up, we will get them solved really quickly. I'd like to introduce my colleagues you're going to hear from today. So Dan Bone, who's our Insight Director for Australia, Sam Furzo, who's our Insight Director for New Zealand, and Craig Irwin, who's our MD for New Zealand and Hong Kong. I'll hand over to Craig now, who's going to briefly talk through the agenda and the format for today. So over to you, Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And good to be on a Trans-Tasman call, which seems like it's the theme of the day, obviously, with our Prime Minister jumping into the Australian Cabinet meeting this morning. And look, it makes a whole lot of sense. We've got a lot in common as we both navigate COVID-19 and the impact it's going to have on us as consumers going forward. I've been in the business a few years, but prior to that, I've been in senior sales and marketing roles in the FMCG world. So I've got a lot of insight and empathy for the challenges many of you are going through. So today, it's important for us that we, really leverage the insights we have and we turn the what's happening into the so what does that mean, and therefore what do we need to do about it. So it's going to be a good session. We've got some great capability in Sam and Dan to share our expert insights. They've been able to use the collaboration we have in the IRI world from the various markets we participate in to bring some global insights and some local insights and help us share some great learnings across the Tasman. We will have Sam and Dan present to us for about 40 minutes this morning or this afternoon, and they'll tag team across the what, so what, now what. And then at the end, we should hopefully have a little bit of time for a bit of Q&A. Once we have done the session, we will load it up to our LinkedIn page. So go ahead and follow us at IRI Asia Pacific, and you'll be able to download a recording of this session then. But most importantly, let's get into it. I know this is what you're waiting for. So Sam, I'll pass over to you.
Thanks, Craig, and welcome to everyone who's joined today. So let's first talk about circumstantial consumption. The pandemic has and will continue to disrupt levels of consumption across all industries. It's created major uncertainty for all of us. And it's a scale of change that, of course, I have to say it is unprecedented. It's unpredictable, fast changing. It's absolutely accelerated behavioural trends. And it has required us to continue to evolve and have agility and responsiveness like we've never seen before. But with this change comes a lot of opportunity. Now, if we just reflect on COVID-19 and the life cycle, in January, who would have thought this is the situation we would find ourselves in? It's been an absolute roller coaster, or if anyone's heard of it, a corona coaster. In March, however, we started to see survival instincts really take precedence. Widespread panic-induced stockpiling ensued. Lockdown has led to isolation, anxiety around health and wealth, and significantly, instantly changed the way we live and shop. Now, if we start to move into the next phase, we're looking at readjustment. The future does remain uncertain, and concern surrounds the economy, which Dan will be discussing. We have all had to make life-altering changes in just a matter of days. Now it's time, though, that we've been recalibrating and reassessing how we live and how we're operating. And all of us are going to be looking at doing things differently. If we look a little bit further forward, revival fuses the old and the current state to form something that's fresh, new and exciting. So how do you shape and become a part of what that new looks like? These are the things that we're going to explore today. But as a starting point, we have really hit atypical scenarios in grocery. If we look at Australia, the peaks were up to 57% value growth. But what we're starting to see is this normalization occurring. In Australia, as an example, we're seeing single-digit growth levels in the last couple of weeks. If we look across to New Zealand, however, growth remains hugely elevated in an international context. And, according to Oxford University, we have the most stringent lockdown measures in the world, which is really shuffling that share of wallet directly into grocery, as pretty much everything is shut. But as we have leveled down in the last few days, it's going to be really interesting to see the further normalization in the numbers that come through in the next few days. So where is this normalization coming from? Well, we've been confronted with in-store restrictions, number of people going into the store to have managed that social distancing, but also limiting the number of products that you can purchase, especially in-demand products, to ensure wider availability. And also to avoid those empty shelves that have exacerbated the panic. Shoppers have changed their buying behavior. We're seeing much more planned shopping, increased in lists used. People are avoiding queues. We're shopping less frequently. We're trying to manage those shopping budgets. And one of the real key reasons that shoppers have changed their buying behavior is this anxiety around going out. Over half of Australians don't feel safe going into the store. This hesitation is likely to last to some degree until a vaccine comes out. And by then, new shopping behaviours would have cemented. If we look to the UK as an example, Tesco's reporting that the number of transactions in April have nearly halved, but their basket size has almost doubled. We're starting to see in Australia some of the same phenomenon occurring. And according to our shopper survey that we conducted in Australia, New Zealand, and the US, the largest claimed behaviour change of shoppers was making fewer, larger trips to stock up and limit store visits. And actually in New Zealand, 1/3 of Kiwis expect these shopping changes to persist into the future. What does this mean? Well, it means less opportunities for categories to get into baskets. With this more rigid shopping behaviour and less trips and less dwell time, as people want to get in and out fast, it also has an impact on less impulsive basket building purchases. So how do you get on the list? How do you elevate your brand recall, get into that consideration set? How do you disrupt that path to purchase if you aren't on the list? So with this in mind, it's no surprise that there has been a surge of interest in online delivery as people's preference is to, 1, stay home, and 2, do big shops. But you can see that interest has dipped pretty quickly as we see store sales normalize, but also as we have seen online operationally fall over due to some scalability issues. In Australia, Coles and Woolworths have had to restrict online orders to essential workers and vulnerable people only. And here in New Zealand, delivery and click and collect slots were really hard to come by. And in fact, I couldn't be bothered going online because it just seemed a little bit too difficult. But We can't ignore that sheer scale of new customer registrations to online grocery shopping. In New Zealand, grocery and liquor online sales grew by 42% in March. And what we've seen in previous research is trial of online shopping has actually a very high level of conversion into that regular usage. Not only this, a quarter of us Kiwis expect to increase usage of online shopping in the future as a result of COVID. Retailers are also scaling up. If you look in the background, we've got the Countdown e-store and also Countdown Rototuna opening up with a well-equipped drive-through and pickup window. As Australian retailers also started to resume online sales, they're quickly trying to restore the faith that online is a valid alternative, while online is still very front of mind during COVID. Retailers are doing this by ramping up their delivery capacity and scaling, including new initiatives around last mile fulfillment through collaborations. For suppliers, it's never been more important to invest in digital marketing, as people are shifting their spend to online. It's now also even more important to establish those omni-channel processes. And in response to this heightened demand that we've seen many food boxes being rolled out by retailers to assist in this efficiency of picking. But Morrisons have taken it a step further in the UK and embraced these curated boxes. The Ramadan Essentials box, for example, includes core staples for the Ramadan period. What opportunities may there be for new boxes? And as a supplier, how can we make sure that we're getting into that box? Another initiative is suppliers going direct to customers, such as Heinz Home in the UK, with its first ever shop offering bundles of core Heinz products to customers directly. It was set up in less than 3 weeks, showcasing the agility in this rapidly evolving reality. And look, traditional grocery is also being challenged by other industries, showing their ability to pivot at pace. Some will likely be temporary, perhaps the McDonald's drive-through with essentials, but meal kit providers such as My Food Bag in New Zealand and U Foods in Australia, which I just noticed yesterday, are starting to position themselves as a one-stop shop. And also in response to food service closures, we see food wholesalers also going direct to shoppers. In our survey, we found that only 2% of Kiwis have purchased through these means so far, and 3% plan to do more so in the future. But it's only early days. How is this penetration and how will that assortment grow? And if we look at more interesting routes to market, China is a great example. Live streaming is proving a very popular and effective way to find new buyers during COVID. It's being used to sell groceries, flowers, fresh produce across platforms such as Alibaba and JD.com. In fact, one of my favorites is JD.com has launched an online clubbing experience weekly, partnering with a Chinese music label and the likes of Budweiser, Remy Martin, Carlsberg, Pernod Ricard. The experience introduces viewers to international brands and has had a large success in converting them into buyers. But as we start to move into the readjustment and revival parts of COVID-19 life cycle, we await the ultimate release party. We need to start looking forward, and it's exciting. There are incredible, magical, simple moments that we're looking forward to. Those first hugs, first haircuts, first music festivals, and if you're a parent, dropping off the kids to school. But as we go into this, there will be a renewed appreciation for life and freedom, and people will only put things back into their lives that they actually want to. So how do you make sure that you're part of that and that they will open their wallets to you? So just in summary, there are category conversion challenges. Remember, we're seeing more planned, less frequent trips and shorter dwell time. Therefore, it's less likely to get products into shopper baskets. So how do you ensure you're part of that consideration set? How do you get on the shopping list? And if you're not on there, how do you disrupt the path to purchase in store? Look, we've seen a huge disruptive effect on attitudes and behaviors. Think about how adaptive and agile your business processes are, and if there are partnerships to scale up or down as you need. Think about the future. Look, there's huge opportunities to tap into this excitement, this euphoria as circumstances change and we get our freedom back. So as we've discussed, shoppers are making changes based on the situation that they're in. And this leads perfectly into our next theme, enjoyable experiences. Many of the behavioral changes we have seen in consumers and shoppers are a result of these stay-at-home mandates. And we've all been stuck at home in response to these social distancing measures and lockdown measures. Many businesses have shut and we've become really self-reliant and resourceful, doing absolutely everything ourselves. Not only this, we're keeping ourselves busy to fill the void of social freedom. We're finding out ways to inject joy and fulfillment into our lives. So therefore, it's not surprising that almost all of us have had some sort of lifestyle change as a result of COVID. In fact, if we look to the right on the screen, there is a word cloud from our Australian shopper survey revealing how the home has become the alternative office, school, cinema, and kids' playground. And while stay-at-home mandates will lift, the home will play a more central role than it did pre-COVID. And as a result of COVID, we've seen some category growth that really reflects the life cycle phases we spoke to in the first section. We've seen this build up in survivalism in the first 4 weeks where people were panic buying toilet rolls, stocking up on essentials such as canned goods, and protection measures such as disinfectants. But in the last 5 weeks, we've really moved into this lockdown and early readjustment phases. The profound impact on lifestyles and self-reliance is clear, as growth categories are driven by experiences such as toys and gardening, home restaurants such as frozen pizza, and lockdown salon hair colorants, which I need to probably go and get some this week, where we have been forced to recreate all of these out-of-home experiences in home. And as we're forced to become self-reliant and learn or relearn how to do many things, leaning on Google and how-to tutorials to educate and inspire ourselves, and we can see this peak in Google Trends. And you know, when we have succeeded in creating a master creation, we're sharing these little accomplishments. 46% of Australians and 37% of Kiwis have been spending much more time on social, according to our shopper survey. And in our little bubbles, we've had much more time than normal to start and restart new hobbies such as gardening, reading. And what this starts to show is how to create relevancy in the at-home environment, remembering at-home will become more central to people's lives. We also see food becoming a central role as it helps us reduce stress, bring joy, and fulfillment during this lockdown period. And 1/3 of us have said that they have increased baking just in the last week. And therefore, it's really obvious in Google Trends, this huge spike we have seen. And baking ticks a lot of boxes. It's enjoyable, it's allowed me to get into my kitchen and cook up a storm. It offers something new and creative, and it alleviates boredom. I personally find it's a good way to calm down and escape, and offers me a bit of distraction away from all the craziness of COVID. But it also allows you to connect with your family and friends. And of course, you can broadcast those amazing achievements on social. Baking offers a lot of opportunity to curate, educate, and interact with your shoppers. And what we've seen is that it's a great basket builder with many complementary subcategories over-indexing in growth. Now, thinking about treats, we have been treating ourselves a lot with baking, but all sorts of other small indulgences to really cope with the stress, anxiety, and boredom. Small indulgences are really offering that escapism and a little bit of pleasure. Whether it's comfort eating, I mean, I've had quite a lot of chocolate, or simply pampering ourselves by applying face masks. During recessions, we do typically see affordable luxuries performing well, as people are looking for antidotes to reality. So therefore, we do anticipate demand in these areas. When it comes to food, eating has become the new eating out. And if you're anything like me, you would have had moments in the last few weeks where you thought you were a master chef, creating culinary masterpieces, and then the next day never wanting to touch anything in the kitchen again, and perhaps going to bed at night dreaming of that chicken korma from down the road that is so inaccessible. But what does this actually mean longer term? Well, Kiwis do intend to cook meals at home more often in the future because of COVID. Why? We're much more cautious and wanting to be socially distant. Restaurants are going to be operating a little bit differently for the foreseeable. And we will be watching our discretionary spending, as Dan will discuss. Therefore, we expect to see changes made to eating habits that continue to drive this at-home food solution and inspiration. And if we think food service has been shut, but man, they have adapted quickly. These loved and missed brands on the screen right now have crossed the threshold into our homes. They've created innovative ways for customers to enjoy the food at home. In the case of Burger, the cult kind of fast food joint in New Zealand, it's also offering cult favorites such as McClure pickles and Pal's RTDs in its general store. And actually, we've seen restaurants adapt really quickly. And we've seen this ultimate move into the heightened quality upgraded solutions. But what's going to be important in the recessionary environment is, even though we've seen the significant upgrade in meal solutions, it's about offering a solution that's cost effective compared to the out-of-home equivalent. So are there opportunities in this space to increase range and for future collaboration? And I mean, one of the things we can't ignore is the seismic shift in terms of how the virtual world has entered our lives. I'm sure there's almost 1,000 people now watching me at home in my living room presenting this to you. Despite this isolation, we're finding ways to date, to work, connect with friends and family, and have a few drinks with our friends. This is obviously good for our mental health, which Dan will talk to. But also, if we think about salons being closed, and you're all looking at my face right now, we still need to look somewhat good. And so what we're starting to see is a real unparalleled driving force for premium professional grade grooming products at home. And brands are joining us in the virtual world, and whether it's Mecca, a beauty retailer that's offering interactive, personalized beauty consultations at home, which really highlights the education and expertise. They're also creating quite a lot of noise in social platforms to encourage in-moment online purchases. Or I love this one, quarantine cuisine. Vegemite partnering with celebrity chef in Australia, Adam Layal, to help Vegemite enthusiasts find more innovative ways to enjoy the iconic spread, which will increase usage occasions. And people are coming together remotely thanks to events like the Asahi Online Virtual Bar. Asahi recently hosted an online drinking party of 1,000 people, so that could be us, including comedians and celebrities from around Japan. Or Mariano's Grocers in the US holding a diverse series of out-of-home events. At-home events rather, whether it's prepping for meals or making cocktails. And what they're doing is ensuring before the event that you have the right ingredients to participate. And of course, where do you get them from? It's Mariano's. So in reflection of enjoyable experiences is that we expect much more at-home occasions when these stay-at-home mandates do lift. People will be looking for convenience meals options, but cooking from home will persist as we get our freedoms back, but as we keep our spending tight. People will be more cautious and restaurants will be operating differently because of the social distancing protocols. And also remember, how we once worked is not how we will work. There'll be much more at home working, meaning more breakfast, coffee, lunch occasions at home. And this means also less commuting, which does pose risks to on-the-go solutions. Treating and indulgences offer antidotes to reality. Remember to offer tools to enable people to do things themselves, like facials. Provide them with professional grade, high quality solutions at home that are affordable, because we want to treat and pamper ourselves during this time. And lastly, this is a repeat from the first section. Think about the future. There are so many opportunities around the corner. Turn the table and pivot those experiences to experiences and bring those experiences to life out of home. Okay, so how else do we be relevant? So Dan is now going to take you through the 3 C's to connect with shoppers. So Dan, it's over to you.
Appreciate your time there, Sam. What I'm going to do is start off talking about a somewhat multifaceted theme, whereby we talk about the issues around care, community, and compassion, and the way in which these themes are actually interrelated, and they are core to forming meaningful connections with consumers in this time of uncertainty and what is a time of high anxiety for a lot of consumers. So there are 4 key things that really underpin this theme. It's the fact that so many of us at the moment are taking a sense of safety and comfort from the solidarity that we see in society overall. There's an awful lot of good acts and altruism that we're seeing, and that includes the commercial or business response to COVID-19 as well. And there is a lot of reassurance that citizens are taking from that. There is the reality that we as individuals, we are recentering on connection and self-care. And that sense of isolation is almost acting as a catalyst for many consumers to actually take better care of their physical and emotional well-being than they were in pre-COVID times. There's the fact that we as consumers and shoppers, we anticipate that businesses become part of the solution and that they contribute to the greater good. And it's a real trigger point, a delta moment for the industry to actually build brand equity, to generate that customer affinity, and equally important at a time of potentially reduced experimentation, to make sure your retail or consumer brand is part of the consideration set. So when I talk about altruism and acts of good in society at large, I want to start off by emphasizing that in times of lockdown, care and compassion starts at home. There's me, there's the room that I'm currently presenting to you in, that has been my new COVID reality for the last 6 weeks. That is an example of one of my many failed attempts to homeschool my children. A great start by turning my back to them, as you can see here. But what that reflects is the challenges that our panelists at IRI Australia have reported to us in the recent research that we've done in terms of responding and managing their lives on a day-to-day basis. And while I don't want to be too self-referential about this, what you can see from a number of the responses that we've cultivated from 5,000 plus panelists around COVID-19 adjustments is the difficulties that family households in particular have had just in terms of making everything work. And it's really elevated the cognitive load that individuals in those households have. And then, of course, there's the reality that we want to connect and care for our elderly parents and grandparents, but we're not able to do that in the way that we would like as a result of the lockdown. So that emphasis on care and compassion, that has heightened the focus on self-care and the good intentions that we are showing. The recent COVID-19 survey that we conducted here in Australia and New Zealand has shown that the proportion of consumers across the two countries are significantly more likely to say that they're doing more to proactively take care of their physical and emotional health than those who are saying that they're doing less. So 41% of Australians say that they're doing more. 33% of New Zealanders told us that they're doing more to take care of their physical and emotional health. And that is a response to mitigate what is a mostly negative experience of lockdown. And sure, there are lots of stories and anecdotes out there around the ingenuity and positive embracement around working from home. But trawling through the responses of our panelists, 5,000 plus responses, whereby they communicated how it's impacted their lives, it's really quite a moving experience. For myself and our shopper panel team, there were actually some real tear-jerking moments, and it reflects the quality of the engagement with our shopper panel at large, that they're willing to so openly share those experiences and frustrations with us. So there's very much a sense that isolation is something that's endured rather than something that's really being appreciated. So if we pivot slightly into the second facet of care, and that's really something that we think is going to be enduring. It's that relentless focus now on clean, hygienic living environments, something that we've referred to as sanitized society. And if you look at a lot of the different surveys and research studies that have been done globally and locally, the overarching leading response among consumers is that increased propensity to mitigate the risk of infection by washing their hands and cleaning surfaces more regularly. And of course, that's reflected by the increased consumer demand for hygiene products. That's abundantly clear there from the sales data that we have coming through from our grocery reads in Australia and New Zealand, respectively. Near triple-digit growth in cleaning, household gloves, personal body and soap products in Australia. And then in New Zealand, we can see that there's nearly 50% growth in cleaners and bleach products, respectively. And it's all geared around the avoidance of germs and contaminants. And this is likely to continue beyond the immediate pandemic crisis. Around a third of us are buying more hygiene products. That's contributed to the spike in supermarket sales of the product categories that I've just mentioned. And of course, it's also connected. Everything is connected to how we've adjusted our lives at home. All the things that Sam was saying with regards to the enrichment that we're getting from cooking and baking, etc., that has actually generated increased usage occasions around hygiene and hand sanitizing products specifically at home. We very much expect this to continue beyond the pandemic crisis And one of the significant implications here is that it's going to lead to increased operating costs. And I say that because businesses at large now are going to have to adjust their operating models to really set industry-defining standards around cleanliness and disinfection. And a great example of this, of course, is in the hotels and leisure industry, which has been significantly disrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic. The relevance here for FMCG, I think, is just a reflection of the expectation of high standards that consumers are going to expect of retailers and out-of-home service providers in general to ensure that they are clean and ultimately safe. And that is going to result in increased operating costs with all the obvious trickle-down effects in terms of how that influences pricing pressures and mitigating those costs across the value chain. Now, if we move from the theme around self-care and that relentless focus on hygiene to the community focus and community and localism. And one of the things that we've seen in Australia in particular is this pivot towards the local community shop, and a real beneficiary of that transition has been Metcash and the Metcash aligned banners. So whether it's Drake's or IGA, we have seen very, very strong metrics coming through from our shopper panel read here in Australia, whereby that increase in shop visits or transactions nearing 40% for Metcash reflected a sales increase in that 4-week period towards the end of March of above 40%. And as a result, we saw Metcash in the latest 4-week period through the month of March actually generate a relatively significant market share gain there of 1.3 percentage points in a relatively short space of time. You can also see that with that fluidity of shopping that we saw in March, consumers were also embracing other grocery shops as well. So if we move from local and proximity shopping into this theme of care and compassion, which of course relates to a newfound empathy that society seems to have developed, the sympathy and empathy that we have with one another's predicament. Now, while these kind of questions around wanting brands to play an active role do invite a degree of social desirability bias, I would argue, these are results of surveys that I've lifted from other media agencies. It does show that consumers very much expect brands to play an active role. It influences their affiliation and their purchase intent, and it mitigates the potential of consumers disregarding a brand or a business as a result of its poor response in these difficult and challenging times. Now, to be fair to marketers and brand managers, and hopefully we have a number of those on this webinar, dealing with this and coming up with the right tone of response is challenging. We have not experienced a pandemic like this. This is reflected through this Google Trends data. And of course, as much as we make fun of the ubiquitous use of the word unprecedented, it is indeed unprecedented usage that we've seen over the course of the last 5 years. It reflects the dynamism and uniqueness of this scenario. But the good news is that the response has been pretty effective. Certainly from an FMCG perspective, again, the research that we had coming through from our shopper panel here in Australia showed that around 25% of participants in the research couldn't really think of a good example from a retailer or supplier in terms of an effective response. But for those 75% of respondents who could think about effective responses, you can really see here how the retailers in FMCG have really been the face of the industry. A lot of quotes here reflecting the perceived positive influence and impact they've had in terms of contributing to the greater good. No better reflection in that simple, salient quote in the middle there, that supermarkets have seemed to be on the ball. So that's an encouraging sentiment to take through into brand communications and building that feel-good factor around the industry more generally. But at the same time, we do need to be mindful of bland and cliched and somewhat homogenous responses that we're starting to see now as well. And there's a great example online that if you Google the every COVID-19 commercial is exactly the same, you will see that there is a need now for distinctive messaging, and messaging that really connects to those enduring brand values and salient brand benefits. So let's have a look at a couple of examples now of certain things that we're seeing to tap into this sentiment. In New Zealand, there's been a bit of a revival around consumer patriotism and initiatives that support local. This is something that happens quite often at a time of crisis, whereby there's that solidarity and anchoring around the flag. The fact that we're seeing closed borders across countries at the moment, I think that heightens that insular focus and heightens the relevance of local products. And we're seeing that with various initiatives like New Zealand Eat Local and the emergence of the New Zealand made products group on Facebook, which is rapidly growing and really reflects that newfound engagement with local products that we're seeing. There's an opportunity to provide inspiration and community connection. It's obviously very difficult for us to have those neighborhood barbecues at the moment, and in the States, Oscar Mayer tapped into that, and it's created a platform for community and interaction by encouraging consumers to join the front yard cookout. The nice thing about this is that it's a platform for community and interaction in these unique times, but it's also got a philanthropic angle as well in terms of encouraging social media shares, which then contribute to Feeding America donations. There's the reality that certain brands and categories are really challenged at the moment as a result of those lifestyle changes that Sam talked about. Unilever's Rexona brand is incentivized to encourage consumers to become more active. Only last week, Unilever talked about how we were seeing 11 fewer occasions each week for a number of personal hygiene categories as a result of the lifestyle changes that we've made at home. So this kind of initiative is part of the social good, but it's also connected to driving brand usage. So a very relevant form of communication there. Humanizing the response is really important here. I'm not going to dwell too much on the example on the left, but I think it's a really nice example of just humanizing everything that we're seeing in terms of brand communications. It's not something that's specific to Woolworths. It's actually a trade union driven initiative. And it's a reflection, unfortunately, of some of the unsocial behavior that we're seeing in society. But there's an opportunity for retailers to really play a role here. And while we didn't really see many mentions around the pharmacy community here in Australia in terms of doing a good thing, we can see here that in the UK, Boots is now trying to provide a safe space for the growing numbers of British citizens who are domestic abuse sufferers. And that's something that's a common theme, unfortunately, in New Zealand, Australia, and indeed the UK as well. We're seeing marketers really rally behind those frontline workers. There's been a lot of campaigns around celebrating the frontline heroes, and it's been happening now at the grocery level as well. So the New Zealand-based Best Foods Supermarket Heroes campaign. We've seen independent retailers rallying around Shop Local, Shop Little Heroes campaign. One of the most nauseating things that I saw recently, which actually turned out to be pretty effective response, was from Mattel. They introduced a bunch of figures that celebrated those frontline workers. And rather than it being a crude attempt to jump on the bandwagon, I did note that all of the proceeds from those are going to communities in need. So lots of different examples going on in terms of how you can show empathy, random acts of kindness. One of the most poignant images for me is that one of my friends in Denmark recently, you can see this on the right-hand side, just had their third child, and such was the the unfortunate reality of lockdown that grandparents weren't able to actually physically hold and touch their newborn grandchild. And this connects to what Sam was talking about earlier, that profound sense of missing out, whether it's your wedding, your once in a lifetime travel, whether it's a funeral, buying your first property, the birth of your child. These are all realities that our panelists have told us about in terms of what they've missed out. And I think it provides a real opportunity for brands to connect with those kind of scenarios and show kindness and empathy. And on the other hand, there's just an opportunity to provide moments of light relief. And Oreo is great at doing this. The brand has that enduring quality around being fun and invigorating. And the campaign around stay home, stay playful is a real testament to how they can be culturally relevant, but stay true to those enduring brand values that reflect Oreo. And this has been one of the most successful, highly engaged advertisement placements in the US that has since gone global because of its success. So the key takeaway I want to emphasize here, and it sounds like a bit of a naff wrap, is when we talk about the 3 C's for the 3 C's. So those themes of care, community, and compassion with those broader stakeholder interests of customers, your colleagues, and your citizens. And if you can think in those terms, I think you have a good foundation for a COVID-19 response that will connect with consumers in meaningful ways. So the final theme that we want to talk about is just around the emergence of a recessionary mindset. And it really is a call to action here for the industry to prepare for what is going to be a relatively significant economic shock. A lot of the things that we've seen materialize thus far haven't really accounted for the fact that our pessimism towards the economy and the finances, the heightened price sensitivity and affordability challenges that we're starting to see, and that inhibited spend is really going to have an impact on the retail marketplace moving forward. Hopefully the FMCG industry will be relatively recession resilient because we're not necessarily talking about discretionary products. But I do think we need to be mindful of the fact that consumers are more mindful of the economic impacts and the enduring economic impacts having an impact on their life more so than the health implications of COVID-19. And in terms of the pessimism and anxiousness that exists around our finances, you can see here that the proportion of Kiwis and Australians who feel that they're worse off financially now compared to a year ago significantly outweighs those who are feeling better off. So that's, of course, indicative of a recessionary mindset kicking in. And I would argue even more so is the outlook that we have for our future financial situation, because that's really what underpins our spending intent. Spending intent is what drives economic activity at large, and that's really, I think, what's going to help mitigate the longer term implications of the recession, or impending recession, I should say. Now, the reality is that a minority of New Zealand and Australian households are telling us at the moment that they are maintaining a regular spend. So in other words, households in New Zealand and Australia are already pulling back in terms of their spending. And it's not just research that we've done at a local level that's showing this. I came across some McKinsey research a few days ago that looked across a broader range of consumer market categories. And in those 30 categories, only 3 of them did Australian respondents say that they intended to spend more. You can see that recessionary resilience of groceries and household supplies, but across the other 27 categories, our spending intent was significantly down. Again, reflective of a recessionary mindset, reflective of the fact that very few of us expect our spending to normalize when the economy improves. You can see that very few New Zealand and Australian respondents agree with the statement that when the economy improves, and of course there's a huge amount of ambiguity around that they will go back to their old spending habits. And I think also Sam talked about this in the first section about not having the discretionary funds to try new things. So generally what we see is at times of recession and economic hardship, consumers are often restricting their spend, and they're becoming safer in their purchase or their consumption behavior as well. So we're likely to see a reduction in experimentation and trying new things as a result of household incomes being impacted by COVID-19 restrictions. So we can already see that call to action around recession-proofing your business. Coles are anticipating a recession that's unlike anything that we've had before. And of course, when you start talking about that, that's when we start talking about the pivot to value and ensuring that value and price perception is the key theme in the industry and key to the response. What can we expect? Well, we can definitely expect a lot of belt tightening and a sense of doing without. We're going to see consumers spending less on eating out, spending less on personal services. But as Sam mentioned, that does create opportunities, of course, to drive sales for at-home consumption. We're going to see consumers buying smaller amounts, and that of course has big implications for pack price architectures. We need to be thinking about those kind of things in advance. Buying at lower prices, that migration to value brands and private label in particular. And we know from previous recessions, that's when discounters like Aldi and Lidl have shone in the past. We would expect to see those value channels have and value outlets have even more relevance given the mindset that I've just talked about going forward. A word of caution and a timely reminder from legacy IRI data. The last time we saw a recession kick in globally, although it wasn't technically a recession, certainly in Australia, we saw a significant tapering off in growth in the industry. Now, is that a question of consumers tightening their belts, or was it also a case of an industry environment relying on price promotions and actually eroding value from the industry at large? When we talk about good value, let's not forget that consumers don't necessarily rank the lowest price as the predominant issue with regards to good value. It's about getting the best quality I can for my budget. So be wary of just merely gravitating to the lowest price. The final thing I just want to say here is that, well, what's next for your categories? What does post-COVID isolation look like for category performance? And some headline things that we've talked about or outlined here on this slide is that we're expecting the permanency in the sales spike in usage around hygiene and cleaning products. We would expect to see a gradual reduction in the sales of those cooking and indulgence products, but still see above average usage and consumption given the slow return to normal living. We would expect to see everyday essentials like toilet paper and pasta return back to prior levels, and the other at-home non-essentials move in line with the recovery. But we are an analytics business, and that what I've just talked about there is a top-line overview of what we would expect. We have the credence and capabilities around tactical and strategic forecasting to help you plan for your expected sales pipeline going forward. If this is something that you would like to speak to us about, please feel free to get in touch. We have the capabilities locally to assist with those forecasting challenges moving forward. And at the same time, we continue to provide, like this event, an ongoing hub of content in and around the developments of COVID-19, big focus on data-led insights and that blend of scan, shopper, loyalty, and attitudinal research that you've seen in this presentation. Now, I know that we've left it very short for questions. I apologize for that. So I will hand over very quickly now to Paul and Craig, just to see if we can get some question responses in before the time is out. Thank you very much for your attention, everyone.
Hi there. Thank you, Sam and Dan, for those great insights. I hope that's proved really valuable to everybody on the session. Craig and I were attempting to answer questions as we went along. We've literally had well over 100. Craig clearly types faster than me because he's answered a lot more than I have. Just conscious of time and all of your time as well, as it's 11:58. So my suggestion is that we will follow up with the questions outside of this session, if that's okay with everybody there, so we can do those justice. Quite a few of the questions actually were answered by Sam and Dan as we went through the session, so hopefully you got those as well. But we will follow up shortly after this with the outstanding questions that we haven't got to you. Thank you very much for joining. There will be a follow-up questionnaire that is sent also, just about how we did and how we can improve the session. So please do complete that and send that back to us. You know, and get in touch with us on LinkedIn if you have other questions or anything about the presentation today. But I think we'll draw it to a close there. But thank you very much to everybody for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.